You've probably driven past hundreds of tanker trucks on the highway without giving them a second thought. Silver cylinders rolling down the road, carrying fuel or milk or chemicals from one place to another. But if you actually look at one closely, something doesn't make sense. The tank is round, perfectly cylindrical. Every single tanker truck you've ever seen uses the exact same shape. Whether it's hauling gasoline in Texas, or water in Japan, or liquid nitrogen in Germany. The shape never changes. And here's what makes that strange. A rectangular tank would actually hold more liquid using the same amount of metal. Think about how shipping containers work. They're rectangular boxes that stack perfectly on cargo ships and trains. They maximize every inch of space. A rectangular fuel tank would do the same thing. It would fit the truck frame edge to edge with no wasted space. It would be easier to weld together, simpler to manufacture, and cheaper to build. So why doesn't anyone use them? Why does every tanker manufacturer in every country choose the shape that holds less instead of the shape that holds more? The answer isn't about maximizing cargo. It's about surviving the cargo. When a tanker truck rolls down the highway at 70 miles per hour, it's carrying up to 11,000 gallons of liquid. Diesel fuel weighs about 7 pounds per gallon, which means a full tanker is hauling roughly 77,000 pounds of fluid. That's the weight of about 25 adult elephants, all sloshing around inside a metal shell every time the driver changes lanes or hits the brakes. That liquid is constantly moving. It surges forward when the truck slows down. It pushes sideways when the truck turns. It sloshes back and forth over bumps and dips in the road. And all that movement creates enormous pressure against the walls of the tank. The forces involved are hard to visualize until you see what happens when they go wrong. A tanker that tips over doesn't just spill its cargo. The sudden shift of tens of thousands of pounds of liquid can tear the tank apart, split welds open, and turn the entire vehicle into a cascading disaster. This is where the shape becomes critical, because when liquid pushes on a wall, it doesn't push in just one direction. It pushes outward in every direction at once, spreading force across every surface it touches. If that force hits a flat wall with sharp corners, the pressure doesn't distribute evenly. It concentrates at the weakest points, which are always the edges and corners. Those spots end up carrying far more stress than the flat middle sections. Under enough load, or just over enough time, that's exactly where cracks form and failures happen. A curved wall changes everything. When pressure hits a curve, it gets redirected smoothly around the surface. The force spreads equally across every inch of the tank with no corner to stack up on and no weak point to attack. It's the difference between squeezing a pillow by pinching one corner versus wrapping both arms around it. The pinch tears the seams because all the force goes to one spot. The hug holds everything together because the pressure is shared. This is why a cylindrical tank can actually be built with less steel than a rectangular one, while still being stronger. The shape itself is doing structural work that the material alone couldn't handle. Every curve is distributing load, and because the pressure spreads so evenly, you don't need as much metal thickness to safely contain the same amount of liquid. But here's the thing that most people miss. Pressure distribution is only half the story. There's a second problem that the round shape solves, and this one is what actually tips trucks over. When a tanker truck hits the brakes hard, the liquid inside doesn't stop moving. Physics won't allow it. The fluid keeps surging forward, even as the truck slows down, and all that mass has to go somewhere. In a rectangular tank, the moving liquid slams into the flat front wall all at once. It's like a wave hitting a seawall at full force, delivering maximum impact in a single moment. That sudden surge throws the truck's weight forward violently. It fights against the brakes, and on a curve, it can shift the center of gravity enough to flip the entire rig sideways. This is called liquid surge, and it's one of the leading causes of tanker truck accidents on highways. A cylindrical tank handles this completely differently. When the liquid surges forward, it doesn't hit a flat wall. Instead, it rolls up the curved surface and then eases back down gradually as the momentum dissipates. The energy gets spread out over time instead of arriving all at once as one brutal impact. The curve acts like a built-in shock absorber, smoothing out the force that would otherwise destabilize the truck. This is why tanker trucks can brake faster and corner more safely than you'd expect, given how much liquid they're carrying. The geometry of the tank is doing work that the driver and the brakes simply can't do on their own. The shape is actively preventing rollovers every single time the truck changes speed or direction. If you look closely at tanker trucks, you'll notice that some are perfectly round in cross-section, while others are slightly oval, wider than they are tall. This isn't just an aesthetic choice, it's a real engineering debate that's been going on for decades, and both sides have compelling arguments. The oval shape pushes the center of gravity lower to the ground by spreading the weight out horizontally instead of stacking it vertically. This makes the truck significantly harder to tip over on tight highway curves, especially when carrying dense liquids like concentrated acids or molten sulfur. The lower profile also means the truck can fit under bridges and overpasses that might be too low for a perfectly round tank of the same capacity. Engineers who favor the pure circle argue that it handles internal pressure more efficiently. A perfect circle distributes force with mathematical precision, creating equal stress at every point on the circumference. An oval, by contrast, has slightly higher stress where the curve is tightest, which means those sections need to be reinforced with thicker metal. That adds weight and cost. The debate often comes down to what the truck will be hauling and where it will be driving. Tankers carrying highly pressurized liquefied gases tend to use perfect circles because the pressure demands it. Tankers hauling lower pressure liquids like milk or water on winding mountain roads often use ovals because the stability advantage outweighs the structural trade-off. Both designs are in widespread use today, and both are fundamentally cylinders solving the same core problems. The argument isn't whether round works, it's about which version of round works best for a specific job. Now compare this to the big rectangular shipping containers you see on cargo ships and freight trains. Those containers are square because they carry solid cargo: boxes, machines, furniture, packaged goods. Solid stuff doesn't slosh. It doesn't surge into walls when the vehicle brakes. There's no moving pressure problem to solve, so the rectangular shape works perfectly fine. The shape of any container is always the answer to one specific question: what is actually happening inside it while it moves? And this question is older than you think. The cylindrical tanker truck sitting on the highway didn't appear out of nowhere. It's the end point of a story that goes back thousands of years, long before engines or highways or the oil industry existed. People have been moving liquids in wooden barrels since ancient times. Romans used cylindrical barrels to transport wine across their empire. Sailors stored drinking water and whale oil in barrels on ocean voyages that lasted months through rough seas. The barrel might be humanity's oldest pressure container, and it was round for the exact same reason modern tankers are round. The curved wooden staves of a barrel spread pressure evenly around the entire structure, preventing the barrel from bursting open. But for most of history, nobody understood why this worked. They just knew that round barrels didn't fail as often as other shapes, so they kept making them round. The physics became brutally clear during the Industrial Revolution. In the early 1800s, engineers built steam boilers to power factories and locomotives. Early boilers were rectangular because flat walls seemed simpler and cheaper to construct. The metal sheets could be cut in straight lines and welded together at right angles, which required less precision than forming curved surfaces. But rectangular boilers kept exploding, always at the corners, always at the edges, always exactly where pressure naturally concentrated. These weren't minor failures. When a steam boiler exploded, it could level an entire factory building. The sudden release of superheated steam and flying metal killed workers instantly. Insurance companies started refusing to cover factories that used rectangular boilers. The death toll forced a change. Engineers switched to cylindrical boilers, and the explosions stopped. The curved walls handled steam pressure that would have torn apart any flat surface with corners. This wasn't theory anymore. It was survival. By the time oil was discovered in Titusville, Pennsylvania in 1859, this lesson was already deeply embedded in industrial engineering. The early oil fields faced an immediate problem. They were pulling crude oil out of the ground faster than they could transport it. Wooden barrels worked for small quantities, but the industry needed something bigger that could move on wagons pulled by horses or early steam tractors. The very first tank wagons appeared in the Pennsylvania oil fields in the 1860s, and they were cylindrical from day one. These weren't sophisticated vehicles. They were basically large metal cylinders mounted horizontally on wooden wagon frames. But the engineers who built them understood that trying to haul liquid oil in a rectangular tank would end in disaster. The liquid would surge with every bump in the dirt road, stress would concentrate at the corners, and the tanks would crack open within weeks. Those early cylindrical oil wagons were the direct ancestors of every tanker truck on the road today. The technology evolved from horse-drawn wagons to motor trucks. The capacity increased from hundreds of gallons to thousands, and the materials improved from riveted steel to welded aluminum alloys. But the fundamental shape never changed, because the fundamental physics never changed. And once you understand this, you start seeing it everywhere. Beer kegs are round because they hold liquid under carbon dioxide pressure, and a flat-walled keg would fail at the seams. It's the same pressure problem as a tanker truck, just smaller and colder. Scuba tanks are perfect cylinders because they hold compressed air at up to 3,000 pounds per square inch. No corner or edge could survive that pressure without cracking. Fire extinguishers are cylinders for the same reason. Extremely high internal pressure, a life safety function, and zero margin for a weak point. Your home propane tank is round because propane is stored under pressure, and a rectangular tank would start failing at its edges after just a few heating and cooling cycles. Even AA and AAA batteries are cylinders because the chemical reaction happening inside creates outward pressure as it discharges, and the round shell handles that gradual expansion without bulging or cracking. Rocket fuel tanks are cylindrical. Same physics as a tanker truck, just pointed vertically and traveling considerably faster. Submarines use a cylindrical hull, but with the pressure running in the opposite direction. The ocean pushes inward, trying to crush the sub, and the curved hull spreads that crushing force across the entire surface, so no single point gets overwhelmed. At depth, the pressure difference between inside and outside a submarine can reach thousands of pounds per square inch. A flat-walled submarine hull would implode before it reached even a fraction of operational depth. The cylinder is the only shape that can survive. Aircraft fuselages are round in cross-section because the pressurized cabin air pushes outward against the thin outside air at altitude. Commercial jets fly at around 35,000 feet, where the outside air pressure is roughly 1/4 of what it is at sea level. Inside the cabin, the pressure is kept at a comfortable level equivalent to about 8,000 feet elevation. That pressure difference, maintained across thousands of flights and tens of thousands of pressurization cycles, would tear apart any flat wall with corners. The fuselage takes the shape of a cylinder, for the exact same reason a tanker truck does. In fact, early aircraft designers learned this lesson the hard way. The de Havilland Comet, one of the first commercial jet airliners introduced in the 1950s, suffered a series of catastrophic mid-flight breakups. Investigators eventually discovered that the rectangular windows created stress concentration points in the fuselage. The corners of those windows were acting like crack initiators. Modern aircraft use rounded windows for exactly this reason. Even the windows follow the same principle. Grain silos are round because dry grain actually flows and creates pressure similarly to how liquid does. Your insulated coffee thermos is a cylinder for both structural strength and even heat distribution around the liquid inside. Even MRI machines use a cylindrical bore. The round shape helps manage the geometry of the powerful magnetic field inside. Everywhere you look, the same equation keeps showing up and reaching the same answer. Pressure plus structure equals cylinder. There is one honest trade-off. A round tank sitting on a flat rectangular truck frame leaves triangular gaps along both sides and underneath. That's dead space that can't be used for cargo. A rectangular tank would fill that frame edge to edge and carry more total volume in the same footprint. Engineers knew this cost going in and accepted it anyway. Structural safety and slosh control were simply worth more than the extra volume. Some modern chemical tankers try to close that gap by using several smaller cylinders built inside one outer shell, so the truck can carry multiple different liquids in separate compartments without any risk of mixing. But look inside any one of those compartments and it's still a cylinder. Even the workaround is round. The shape rolling past you on the highway is not tradition or habit or aesthetic preference. It's the last shape standing after centuries of corners cracking, flat walls splitting, and boilers exploding. It's been quietly running your world, from your morning coffee to the batteries in your remote to the plane you flew on last summer. Every tanker truck is round because everything else failed. And now that you know why, you'll never look at one the same way again. What other everyday objects do you think use this same principle? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us keep making content like this. Thanks for watching.